is a good day to die.
That was from the 1990 Joel Schumacher movie Flatliners, featuring Oliver Pratt, Kevin Bacon, Julia Roberts, and her boyfriend at the time, Kiefer Sutherland. Flatliners. Nelson, that was before your time.
Way before my time, brother.
You know what they were doing in that film, huh?
I can tell. Sounds like an episode of ER.
These are 5 medical students at Loyola Medical School in Chicago. They wanted to know what happened when a person left this realm and moved into the next realm. So they were purposely stopping one another's heart.
Well, that's my question. What do you think happens after we die?
That's a great question. I think I should ask you the same thing, and we should explore that on this episode of Put 'em on the Couch. Today,
the afterlife.
Let's put the afterlife on the couch. Yes, sir. And just like that, we're back.
We are back on a Friday.
Welcome back to Put 'em on the Couch, ladies and gentlemen. And I've got with me today our co-host, Nelson Bowyer, back in the studio. Hope you had a nice little week off.
Yeah, pretty nice. Look, it's funny. I think people are going to start to assume that we're kind of obsessed with the macabre. We did Halloween, and now we're talking about what happens after we die.
Yeah, and it's not going to be any better once I answer your question. On the other
Well,
side,
it might be a little bit
opening,
better after I answer your question.
On the other side of the opening, you asked me, man.
Yeah, like what do you think happens when we die? As a practical person, what do you think, man? What happens after we die?
As a rationalist, I believe that my body will stiffen first, and then I believe
rigor mortis.
I believe my face and neck will follow right after, and I think this process of stiffening is going to happen throughout my trunk, and then gradually radiate outwards towards my arms, legs, and eventually my fingers and toes.
Dude,
and
but
then
that's what we know.
And then my body will probably loosen again, and a few days after that, my body's tissues are going to break down, causing the stiff parts to relax again. And then, of course, if
that's what we know.
If my wife honors my last will and testament, I will be cremated. But if I'm not cremated, that will be against my wishes, and I assume that I will be placed in some sort of box, hopefully one that worms and other microorganisms can penetrate pretty quickly and easily, so that I can fertilize that part of the earth.
Okay.
And that's
Thanks, buddy.
That's everything.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah.
That's it, huh?
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Which is why it's so important for me and for anyone listening to treat every day as if tomorrow you're going to be worm food.
Yeah, but don't you think a lot of religious people would treat every day the same way?
I think a lot of religious people treat days as if they're going to live forever.
So, we have talked casually on this show about belief, about atheism, about mysticism, Catholicism, whatever. We've talked a lot about religion, and we know, most of our listeners should know, that you are an atheist. And I've asked you, was it difficult to I like the term acknowledge your atheism rather than
come to terms with the fact that this is
because
all
I don't think
is.
I don't think you've ever believed in God.
I have. As a youngster, I told you I believed in God, but I got tripped up when I was going to church, reading the Bible, particularly the whole Noah's Ark thing. It kind of confused me.
That confuses everybody.
Yeah.
But so you would not have acknowledged your atheism when you were like 20 or 21, right?
Probably not. I didn't start acknowledging it.
But was it there?
Yeah, it was there.
When would you say you stopped believing in God?
I stopped believing in God probably when I was a older teenager.
Okay, and this is a really important question because, and I think it's important for any atheist. When you ceased believing in God, did that mean that you stopped believing in an afterlife? As soon as you said that, okay, I don't believe in God, I don't believe in the ark, I don't believe in these things. I guess was the barrier to your acknowledging atheism that finality of your life?
Um,
Like, you believe when you die, that's it.
yeah. So that's a good question. I think it's the other way around for me, at least. I'm not sure whether it's that way with other people. I'd love to hear. But what you're asking me, I think, is once I came to terms with the fact that death is final and there's no afterlife, then could I give up the belief in God, or was it the other way around? For me,
Right. That's a good.
yeah, for me, I'd already
chicken
given
and
up.
egg.
For me, I think I'd already given up on the belief that there was an afterlife. I couldn't understand how you could be burned or you could be decomposing under the earth, how you could be without blood, without possible tissues and organs, because I understood what embalming was about. I didn't understand how you could exist in any way, shape, or form like you are on earth. And I couldn't wrap my head around this idea of a soul or a spirit that could wander around in some afterlife ether, and be capable of moving and recognizing and remembering and making decisions and doing things. So I think I didn't believe in an afterlife first. And then only after that was I finally able to give up on the belief of a God.
But so you don't believe in ghosts?
Absolutely not. No,
Really?
No.
Because even a lot of atheists I've spoken with believe in ghosts.
Look, there's a lot of atheists that believe in an afterlife. There's a lot of atheists that believe
Do you think that
in all sorts of things.
Do you think your skepticism of an afterlife could or would ebb as you get closer to the grave?
I don't think so, but I suppose anything's possible. I really don't know what's happening to my brain neurochemically whenever I am close to death. I mean, I guess it depends on the way in which I die or the way in which I am dying, right? Like if I'm losing oxygenated blood slowly versus quickly, if I'm being administered certain types of drugs that will cause me to hallucinate. I mean, I don't know. But if I'm in my normal, rational, skeptical state of consciousness that I'm in right now, I can't see that happening, no.
All right, so I guess I have a number of questions, but
Yeah.
when we're talking about the afterlife,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't that make you sad?
No.
Do you feel a sense of loss with the embracing of the idea that you will die and you will and there's nothing else beyond the here and now, this podcast? I mean, it's interesting because you did mention that you looked at our work together as sort of a legacy. And I'll mention that Abraham...
Or as an opportunity to continue on beyond death, yeah.
And Abraham Lincoln felt the same way. He said that when you die, that's your death, but you can live on if you do things worthy of remembrance.
Sure.
And that once people don't remember that you ever existed, that was mortality.
Final, yeah.
That was mortality.
Yeah.
But when you embrace this idea of that's it, that's all, I mean, that wasn't hard, and that isn't hard.
That
you
was
have daughters,
hard. That was very
you have a
hard.
daughter, you have a son, you have a wife.
Yeah.
What if they go first?
Yeah.
What if they predecease you? I mean, how do you do that?
First of all, they might, and no amount of believing in an afterlife or a God or anything else is going to stop that from happening.
No, but it could stop some of your pain.
I fear that it also might make me less vigilant and make me less conscientious about how I spend my final days, months, years, hours on this earth, right? So
I understand that.
I view this as final in the same way I view a movie as final, which is why I hate sequels.
Even better sequels?
I don't know many of them. There might be a few.
Godfather 2.
Yeah. Like a movie, knowing that life is going to come to an end makes the experience of living it more exciting for me.
Wow.
I think that's the way I view it.
Wow.
I think I've also said before that I kind of fall back on Voltaire's words, where I am, death is not.
I like that.
And where death is, I am not. So it soothed my longing, my fear of death, probably more than anything ever has, this idea that where I am, death is not, and where death is, I am not. I can't know death when I'm on this side of it, and I won't know life when I'm on the other side of it. Now, that's for an atheist. That's what I was worried about.
Are you saying that the finality is...
The finality is what scared me.
And the unknowable, that you can't know it provides now some sort of comfort that you can't know.
Before that, it was the single greatest source of my fear was that the finality of death, never, ever, 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 ever coming back.
Right.
As a youngster, I remember thinking, never coming back? And I remember thinking how long a year was, waiting on Christmas. And then I realized, never coming back? This is it? All the people I've ever known, all the people that knew me were never, ever going to see each other. We're never coming back.
Yeah.
That was scary. That was horrifying. It was existentially just anxiety.
It's still scary. Yeah. I think it'd be scary for our listeners. That is a scary thought.
But that notion of where I am right now, I can't know what it's like to be dead. And where death is, if I believe that it's final, then I'm not going to be able to know what it was like to have ever lived. I guess, again, the best way I can describe it is going under anesthesia, right?
Yeah, sure.
I've never woken up from anesthesia and gone, oh my God, that was terrifying.
I hate anesthesia.
By the way, the only thing that's terrifying about anesthesia is the fact that I do wake back up and I have a frame of reference and I can go, oh my God, that's so weird.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
But while I'm in it, there's no thoughts, no memories, no feelings, no decision-making, no perceptions, nothing. It's just nothingness.
Do you think that
and it's easy.
Do you think that embracing the idea of a non-afterlife or a finality to life, do you think that influences your decisions today? Does it make you a more ethical person? You said, it sort of pushed you for a desire to live for the now.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, I don't know if I'm phrasing that right. But is there something to that? Like, do you think you would be different if you believed that tomorrow wasn't?
I might be even more of a procrastinator if I believed that if I had an afterlife.
We still got to get that on the couch.
Right.
We got to do procrastination.
I'm a procrastinator as it is, but I believe that I could make lots of sort of excuses for myself and engage in a lot more intellectual gymnastics to kind of overcome my dissonance if I believed in an afterlife. Because, think about it. The afterlife, it never ends. Like, I've never heard anybody who believes in afterlife says, well, this one, and then you get to go to one more that's equal number of years. No, it's this one, and then you get to go somewhere forever. Like, what?
That's interesting.
It's amazing.
That's interesting.
No. So I view it as, I've got probably 70 years on this earth if I'm average, and I'm probably average in every way. So best case scenario, I got 19 more years on this earth. That's 19 more Christmases. That's 19 more birthdays for my kids. That's 19 more summers. If I want to go, for instance, on a family vacation, I can't say I'm going to do it 2 years now. I better go. I will say that as you get older,
getting dark,
people start to think about their mortality a lot more. People start to want to make connections and reconnections with old family members and friends. My grandpa was just this really salty man's man who didn't have real time for emotions and feelings. It's chew your tobacco, go outside and do hard things. And man, as he got older, he wanted me to look things up on that little computer I had in my hand. He called my phone, right? The computer. Wanted me to look up and see if I could find old friends and family members that he kind of vaguely remembered from his childhood. He wanted to see if I could find them, if we could get in touch with them. And it was cute, but at the same time really sad because I realized that he had squandered 60, 70, 80 potential years of just not even trying to connect with people that were important to him at one point.
It's fascinating to hear you describe this because I, as a believer, and we'll get into me because it's my favorite topic.
Yep.
We'll get into me and what I believe, but as a believer, I feel like I would not embrace death. That's not the right word. I feel like as I were dying, as I were thinking about my last days, you and I would think about them very similarly.
We would think about the same things.
Non-belief.
We would definitely think about the same things.
So I don't think your non-belief
makes me much different
in the afterlife, and my belief in some sort of afterlife really impacts us. But the way you're describing it is that it does impact you, and it does move you and have you make certain decisions partly as a result of that. But I would behave the same way you would. I have the same fears and ideas that you do, and yet I still believe in some sort of afterlife.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, you remember the one of the most winning contestants on Jeopardy, Ken Jennings?
Yeah, isn't he like the host now or something?
He may be.
I don't know.
Anyway, he just wrote a book.
That's the
by
dude
the
who
way.
won like a bunch, right?
He knows a lot of things about a lot of things, but something admittedly he didn't know anything about was the afterlife. And apparently his latest book, which may be his only book, 100 Places to See After You Die, a travel guide to the afterlife,
deceased.
takes on his knowledge of just about everything and attempts to extend it to the great unknown, death. The book focuses on the afterlife, including heaven, hell, and everything in between as depicted in religion, pop culture, literature, and more. How about that?
That's awesome.
Well, so I think
That's awesome, man.
that does go to show you how, ubiquitous, ephemeral, how just everywhere all at once, to use part of the name of last year's Academy Award-winning movie, right? How everything all at once religion is, right?
Yeah.
To both believer and non-believer.
Do you look down on believers?
No. Only if they use their belief as an excuse for not getting shit done.
Who does that?
Lots of people, man.
I mean, even the
Lots
Pope
of
gets shit
people.
done. The Pope is a doer.
Gotta get stuff done. You can't, for instance, wait around until you're on
Okay,
your
but
deathbed
I'm not
to
talking
say,
about that. I'm talking about I'm talking about like people who the fundamentalists of any religion. Do you, as an intellectual, as somebody who seeks
No.
evidence, do you look down on that? And say,
no,
"Man, what
again,
the
not unless they're judging people and discriminating against people purposefully, like not giving people access to health care or not giving people life-saving medicines, kind of
So
like Mother
you sort
Teresa
of
did in
use it
Calcutta.
as like a retort, as saying, look, yeah, so you don't, what part of the Bible are you reading? You're not giving people health care.
Yeah, I worry about that. I worry that religion, just moral superiority in general, right, is one of the most potent ways in which you can discriminate and feel like you're in the right. Like, I think I've said this before. Anybody can do good. Anybody can do bad. But to do bad in the name of good probably takes some sort of religion.
Yeah, I think that's
And
fair.
I worry,
think that's fair.
worry
I
about,
definitely think that's fair.
self-righteousness is bad, but when you are righteous because you believe there's a bigger, higher purpose for what you're doing, I worry about that. Look, if you're out there giving charity, if you're out there saving lives, if you're out there on the street trying to make sure junkies have clean needles, if you're out there with the police and with the EMTs Narcaning people who've overdosed, if you're literally working in orphanages and you're saying, I'm doing it because there's a higher calling and I'm doing this because there's more to life and more meaning and purpose than what meets the eye, I applaud you. But if you're saying, you know what, you're going to hell because you don't believe the way I do, and no, I'm not going to give you the same rights, and no, I don't want to make a birthday cake for you, and no, I don't want to marry you. I mean, that just gets a
wedding
little
cake?
slimy and petty. I don't know. I don't like it, man.
Yeah, but
No, I worry about that.
And I'm glad we've arrived at this point because I feel like this.
Don't use religion as a cudgel.
Yeah, and this happens to me, I'll admit on occasion.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's possible that the people who do use religion as a cudgel, that the people who are fundamentalists, who are, nope, dinosaurs were there 100%, and everybody was on the ark 2 by 2,
Okay.
and do you think it's
The biblical
possible that
literalists.
those people preclude you from exploring spirituality to a deeper degree?
No.
I mean, if you
I do
define
believe-
those people as the spiritual people, doesn't that limit
No, I don't
our
define,
understanding of spirituality?
No, I don't define them as spiritual people. I don't define most people who are religious as spiritual. I would say that I'm probably more spiritual than most of the people I know who are religious.
In what way?
Well, I do believe in a spirit, in a non-tangible power, purpose that we can create when we come together and build things like community, when we build things like cities, when we built Western civilization. So I believe in the spirit of shared, experience, alliances, coalitions, the common good. I mean, like any genuine politician or genuinely loving person, religious or otherwise. So, I don't know if I can define spirituality or the spirit. And if I did, I certainly wouldn't try to define it by just giving it the same clothing that maybe some religious people give their belief in God or gods. But yeah, I don't think religion has the, what would you call it? I don't think they own spirituality. I don't even think they own morality for that matter. I guess I think religion, morality, spirituality are not all mutually exclusive, but they're not necessarily the same thing, that's for sure. They might overlap, but
it's really interesting to hear you say that you believe that, there is I don't want to say divinity, but
invisible thread.
There is something to living well, doing good works, that is sort of creating your own spirituality.
Yeah, that you can't put into words, and that you might not even be able to put into. You can put it into practice. You know it when you see it. You can actually feel it.
See
that's
that's so interesting because you're talking now about something that can't be quantified.
But I am talking about here and now, and I'm talking about something that we can create, whether we believe that
but
we're creating it
because. But how is that different than Confucianism or Taoism or the belief in the way or the belief?
Well, now you're getting different. Now that's a little different when you get into Eastern religions that don't
Eastern philosophy.
Yeah, Eastern philosophies and religions when you don't have a specific I call it a 3-O God, right? The omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent God, like the Muslim God or the Christian God in particular. If you
find yourself, what's the word? Do you find yourself to be sort of confrontational with that idea of the Abrahamic God?
Yeah, I think so.
And I'm going to confess to you, I share that confrontation. I share that I don't want to say animosity because that's right. I'm repulsed by it.
It sounds like an
I know that
autocrat.
sounds
wrong. Like an authoritative dad.
Yes, like
and
that
I don't
idea
like
that
do it because I said do it.
Yeah, I am repulsed.
And you don't want
to
disappoint me. Just wait until your dad gets home. That's the way I felt when I used to go to church. Like, well, you do that, you just wait until God finds out. Like,
as a believer, I can tell you that I feel that as well.
And
I feel that as well.
And honestly, most movies, stories, books, most people's imagination depict like the afterlife's waiting room as this place where you go and there's a man, maybe also old with a beard, who maybe it's St. Peter or someone else, who's kind of standing at the threshold, at the precipice with the clipboard.
I'm more of a Beetlejuice.
You're in the waiting room.
I love the Beetlejuice where they're in the waiting room. I love that.
Well, I'm not sure if you know this or not, but there is a new TikToker.
Never gonna believe this. A Civil War ghost shows up in the lobby last week. He says to her, "Can you help me?" And I jump in. And I said, "Well, it depends. What side are you fighting for?" Yeah. I've never seen a ghost get pale. As pale.
Her name is Tarantino21.
Shout out to Tarantino21.
And she plays a character on TikTok, right? And she is a New Yorker with a pretty thick accent. She's got on like a bathrobe, and she's chewing gum really hard. And she plays the role of Denise, the person that you're going to meet in Heaven's Waiting Room.
God.
And it's pretty interesting.
It's good?
Right.
I gotta check this out.
Very good. Shout out to Tarantino21.
Yeah, please.
So that's, by the way,
that's
if I am going to meet someone after death, she's exactly the kind of person I'm looking for.
Oh, let's play that
someone
game.
With
let's
a sense
play
of
that
humor.
game. All right. Now, you don't believe.
Mm-mm.
But if you did believe,
yeah,
who would you want to meet
in the
afterlife?
Man, I'm hoping it's someone with a sense of humor. That's for sure.
Okay, that is so.
Oh, you mean
no?
You mean as the person who's going to decide whether or not I get into heaven?
No. Just like
whether I'm in heaven, hell, or somewhere in between. Who do I want to first see?
Let's say you're in. You're in.
Okay.
I'm putting you in.
Yeah. Who do I want to see?
Who do you want to meet? If there was one person that you could meet after death, who would it be?
Well, I mean, obviously, I want to meet some of the people that I've loved and who have, long been deceased, like my great grandmother. I've mentioned her before, but
boring.
No, it's got to be
Stretch the
someone.
mind.
Yeah.
Somebody fun like Hugh Hefner. You would definitely meet Hugh.
I don't know, maybe Lenny Bruce.
I have a reputation for being sort of controversial and irreverent, and also the semantic bear trap of bad taste.
I'd love to know if he thinks any of these
Lenny
comedians,
Bruce.
if
Okay,
he thinks
I like
any of these
that.
comedians
Now we're talking.
are interesting, intelligent. I'd love to hear what he has to say about woke culture, Lenny Bruce.
Yeah, me too. That would be cool.
So, so for comedians, somebody like Lenny Bruce, Mitch Hedberg. Actors, I don't know.
What about a historical figure? Let's play in my ballpark. Come on now.
Historical figure.
I think
man,
Lincoln would-
Jefferson.
No,
we
I
have
think
missed,
Jefferson's kind of an ass.
but
And Lincoln
haven't
would kind
we
of be a
misquoted
bore.
Jefferson so much, and we've gotten into the weeds regarding what Jefferson meant by what he wrote and what he meant by what he did. I'd love to just sit down with
Little
him
clarification
and just go,
would be
look, dude.
interesting.
Now that you've crossed over. And you don't know anyone anything, right? And no one's ever going to hear this interview except
Yeah,
me.
level
with me right
Let's
now,
talk.
right?
Let's-
What were you thinking, right? When?
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
That'd be cool. I think Washington would be a bore. I think Lincoln would be kind of a bore. I would love to talk to. I would love to talk to Ben Franklin. I'd love to talk to Ben Franklin.
Now, why Ben Franklin?
I mean, because he's like the Dos Equis guy. He's the most interesting man in the world.
Well, he definitely
Politically, scientifically. I feel, you know why more than anything I'd love to talk to him? I'd love to talk to him about his will. I would love to talk to him about his decision to have 2 sets of loans, one for Philadelphia, one for Boston, and about just this difference that existed between him and the rest of the founders. This was a city mouse. I'm a city mouse. You're a city mouse, kind of, with a country accent. But he was just fascinating. I would love to talk to Ben Franklin
I can appreciate
about just any number of scientific things, philosophical things. He was a Quaker. He wanted to end slavery. I'd love to get his thoughts on the Civil War, what happened, all that
and if
stuff.
you're thinking about running for public office again, maybe you get his ideas
no.
about how to run. Like
He would tell me not to.
Yeah, he probably would. I would love to ask Ronald Reagan what he thinks about people invoking his name constantly.
I would like that,
especially
too.
these MAGA types
I would
or the
love
Sean
that, too.
Hannitys, right? These neocons. I'd love to know what they think whenever they,
Or
what
wouldn't
he thinks when they say, "Well, I'm a Ronald Reagan Republican." I'd love to hear him say,
What
"Yeah,
about?
I think they are Ronald Reagan Republicans," or "No, the hell they're not."
I would love to get Dr. King's thoughts on people who are just like, hey, you know what? We shouldn't treat people differently based on race. Hashtag Dr. King.
Yeah.
And these are people who absolutely love to treat people differently based on race. And
I'd
would love to
also
have-
like to find out the authors of all of these quotes that have been misattributed to Morgan Freeman in the last, 10, 15 years on the internet.
I think there's probably 100 in the last 10 to 15
Well,
minutes.
look, now that you know my thoughts about the afterlife and sort of what informs my beliefs or lack thereof, I'd like to hear your take on the other side. But for now, let's,
Whoa. Where?
on the other side.
Let's do it.
Any notion of the true strengths and depths of the opposition to our work. There's the whole medical establishment, of course, baying to send Freud to the auto da fe. But that's as nothing compared to what happens when our ideas begin to trickle through in whatever garbled form they're relayed to the public. The denials, the frenzy, the incoherent rage.
I had to sneak that little soundbite back in there. We don't
Hey,
do it nearly enough.
the father of our show,
Yeah, the
Dr.
father of our
Freud,
show.
was he a believer?
I
I know
don't
he
think he
was-
was a believer, but I can tell you that would be a good one to have a conversation with as well. And speaking of Dr. Freud, Sir Anthony Hopkins,
Sir Hopkins.
is going to play
I heard this.
Dr. Freud in a new movie biopic. I don't know, it looked pretty interesting
Yeah.
just
I
from
heard I heard that.
the little clips I saw. So yeah, we're talking about the afterlife if you're just joining us, and
Peace be with you.
got a lot of things to talk about related to the afterlife before we end this show. What's so bad about the here and now that makes you long or pine for an afterlife, Nelson?
It's first of all, I don't pine for or wish for an afterlife. I like this life a lot. I enjoy this life a lot.
But if
just
and when this life ceases to exist for you,
well, it will. It'll cease to exist for all of us.
So you do agree with that part?
Yeah, 100%. But
you don't agree with mortality. You believe there is such thing as immortality. All right, tell us why.
And for me, I don't pretend to know what immortality looks like. But here's what I do know as a historian, is that whenever we separated from lower animals, and I don't know exactly what point that was, but when we did, we have always connected to the divine. Neanderthals, other early hominid species buried their dead.
Mm-hmm.
We've always had this, and I don't want to call it a curiosity because it's just different.
A fairy fancy?
I don't think that would be a fair term either. We've always had this innate knowledge of something beyond. You know, my sister is a devout atheist.
Oh, yeah. Shout out to her, by the way. You told
Happy
me
birthday,
it was her
Jana.
birthday. Happy birthday, Jana. Hopefully, if we shout out enough people's names during these podcasts, people will listen, right?
Listen and like, please, and subscribe.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. She said to me one day that Egyptians believe that cats were gods.
Mm-hmm.
And I did counter. I said, you know, if Egyptians came back and took 2 seconds and looked at our internet, they would probably be like, yeah, nailed that one.
Absolutely.
But I don't think we should diminish those beliefs. Rather, I think those beliefs are connected to something so human. The idea that, or the innate understanding in each of us, and even you, Mr. Atheist, acknowledged or claimed to acknowledge that there is something spiritual in what we create and in what we do on a daily basis. And I just feel like that continues on, that is part of being human, that there is no finality to death, that there's light and there's dark, and there can't be one without the other. There can't be life without death. And so I just don't fear it because of that belief.
Yeah. Well.
Now, I don't believe in the ark. I don't believe.
You're not a
I'm not a
biblical
fundamentalist.
literalist.
No, God, no.
Would you say you're more spiritual than you are religious, or would you say you're more?
I'm far more spiritual than I am religious. In fact, I would say I'm irreligious.
Do
I'm
you
not
need
religious.
to have a 3-0 or some kind of autocratic God, some kind of sky God to believe? Like tomorrow, if you woke up and said, okay, I get it. There's no God that's judging us, that's up there waiting on us. There's nobody up there to receive me when I die. Would that be okay, or would that fundamentally change?
I'll be very honest with you, and I'm not sure I've ever said this out loud.
Okay.
I don't believe in that conception of God.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe in God the Father.
Okay.
I believe I'm a mystic.
Yeah.
I think that God is everywhere and in everything and in you and in me, whatever. And I don't pretend to know what that is. I don't really have a concept of the Almighty, but I do believe very deeply in the idea that there is meaning and purpose to our existence.
And do you believe it's everywhere all at once in everything? So is it
Most assuredly.
omnipotent and omnipresent? All powerful too? Do you believe this God or this energy is all powerful?
Eastern religions look at the divine, or look at God, if you want to call it God, as, or I guess what I should say is Eastern religions look at life as sort of a game. And the Godhead, through this game of life, is playing an elaborate hide and seek, forgetting itself. And there's something that just strikes me as eminently understandable about that, because if you were to ask me, well, Nelson, what do you want? What do you believe? What do you want right now? I would have a very difficult time answering you. Now, of course, there are things that I want. I would like a beer.
Yeah.
I would like a good meal. I would like a vacation.
Now or in the afterlife, or both?
Both.
Okay.
Both.
So in
But
many ways, you want your afterlife to be kind of like it is here.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love that. But if you were divine, right, wouldn't you want to forget that for a minute? I mean, if you were God, wouldn't boredom be the biggest problem that you would face? If you were God and you could have anything you wanted at any time, boredom
I guess it
would
depends
be
on
your
who you
problem.
brought on board with you, right? Like, you got to be careful about who you cast out and who you accept, is what I think. I was going to ask you a non-serious question.
Sure.
Not that any of these have been too serious, at least not for an
We
atheist.
don't do too serious.
But one I have to ask is, who are you? Do you have anyone you're least excited about seeing when you get to the afterlife?
No,
No.
absolutely
See, there's
not.
plenty of people
Absolutely
I do not
not.
want to see.
And I'm going
right?
to tell you why, though.
I'm glad they're no longer here. I don't want to see them, and so. Maybe that's another thing that informs my beliefs in the afterlife.
It's like life and death and light and dark. I need people that I don't like to be around me.
Do you need all 100 and maybe 10 billion of them that's ever walked the earth for the last, I don't know.
Geez, you're an ass. So there's
300
110 billion that you don't like?
Well, there's 110 billion. There's 110
almost
billion
everybody.
like Homo sapiens that have probably walked the earth.
Yeah.
We only have 8 billion currently.
Yeah.
Now, what I find interesting is that all 110 billion of them that have walked the earth for the past several 100,000 years, they know what the afterlife's like. But not one of them have come back or reported back to us.
But as an academic, and you're one of the smartest guys I know. You're an intellectual, and I think being an intellectual, requires a certain curiosity. To me, losing that curiosity, you don't have any
100%
question about what it's all about.
Oh God, yeah, of course. Which is why I am fascinated.
So would you just could you be open to the idea of an afterlife?
No.
Or do you just reject it?
No,
out of
I
hand?
reject it out of hand. However, I am very interested in people who believe there's an afterlife, particularly those people who believe that they've been on the precipice or been into the afterlife and then
You're
just
talking
found their
about
way
our
back.
friend Phil McCaskey.
I'm talking
who's
about
gone many times.
anyone who has allegedly experienced an NDE, a
So what do you
near-death
think
experience.
that? Okay, so that is a great starting point for another comment. What do you think that means? So many people have said, "Look, this happened to me." They're all similar. Some are drug based. Some are not.
Some are atheists. Some are Christian. Some are
What
Buddhist.
is happening here?
Well, from a physiological perspective, we think that some of the similarities between people's reports of these near-death experiences is that when we do die, our organ systems are very similar in what they do, and therefore when they begin to shut down or fail. For instance, one of the main, if not the way in which someone determines the time of death is when you cease to hear the heart beating anymore.
Right.
Right. Now, it's cardiac arrest, baby, right? Like when the heart arrests.
Yeah.
Now, of course, that doesn't stop people from pushing on it and trying to jumpstart it with paddles or whatever. And if you can get it back, then of course you don't give them a time of death. You wait until it stops again, right?
Right.
And it could stop again in 2 minutes. It could stop again in 2 years or 20 years. So I am very interested, and I do believe that people have indeed died and been brought back to life. And I believe that sequence of events and all of the biochemical things that sort of transpire when average people do die and are brought back to life are such that they may help explain the similar perceptual experiences we have in the same way that our shared experiences as humans and our shared physiology as humans explains how similar our fantasies, our hallucinations when we sleep called dreams are, right? Like, it's no secret that if you and I sat here and talked about what we dream about, we would probably recognize one another's dreams. Maybe literally recognize them, but certainly the themes.
Did you ever have I'm going to school in my underwear dream?
Oh my gosh, yes. Have you ever had that I'm flying dream?
No, falling a number of times.
Have you ever
I never
had
a flying dream.
Have you ever had the
I've been
I'm
naked
running
in a
trying to
dream a lot.
escape from something that's chasing me,
Yes,
and I'm running through
yes.
like molasses and I can't go very
Oh,
fast.
I didn't have molasses. It was snow.
Snow.
But yes,
pushing a
giant.
door to, and you can't quite get it shut and
Never
locked.
had that one. That's weird.
Yeah, so there's so many.
You might need some couch time, but it's
So, I mean, again, I don't want to cheapen anyone's near-death experience, but I don't.
No, I don't think we're cheapening it. We're
necessarily
exploring it, man.
believe that
We're
it's
exploring it.
evidence of an afterlife.
But
However,
this is what bothers me, though. I don't think you can cheapen
by explaining it
by explaining
medically
it,
or physiologically,
or by just saying, "Look, this is these are things that happen when you're near death."
or what we believe
I mean,
happens.
I think that speaks to a weakness of conviction when it comes to people's spiritual ideals.
So I'm interested in it, in the same way the psychiatrist at the University of Virginia, who just wrote a book called After, by the way.
Oh yeah, I heard about
how he's into it. He was very much a non-believer, and when he started interviewing patients who had these near-death experiences, he became a believer in the afterlife. And his story is very anecdotal. His patient stories are obviously testimonials, but this is a very smart, thoughtful guy who's come to the belief in an afterlife, I think, very methodically, slowly, honestly. And he has convinced himself that, there's an afterlife. Now, are you familiar with the common themes of people who have experienced near death?
Yeah, I would say so.
What do you think sort of are the commonalities that people tell?
I've heard people speak of an overwhelming sense of calmness.
Yeah, that peace. So there's big emotions, typically peace.
I've heard people talk about a light, but I think that's a little vague.
Well,
I've heard
they're
people
moving through one realm
a
into another.
Stillness, stillness, or he said peace, but
usually an out of body event. Sometimes people feel
people
themselves or see themselves raising above.
Absolutely, I've
and they
heard
can
that
see
before.
things going on in the room.
Yes.
Well, this idea of moving beyond yourself, being raised out of yourself, maybe above yourself, or that's the thing this guy from the University of Virginia began to convince him, is that he had patients who said, look, when I died of cardiac arrest on that table, I remember rising above myself, looking around at everyone, and I remember the mismatched shoestrings in one of the nurse's shoes. And the doctor was like, how in the world could you explain that? Another one said, I was in the afterlife. I was walking towards some threshold, and I heard someone call my name, and I looked back, and it was a lady who was a nurse of mine when I was in the hospital. And I remembered that she had taken the weekend off. And she comes to me and says, you got to go back. You can't be here. And he says, what's going on? Why don't you come back? And she said, because I'm not here anymore. Please tell my parents I'm sorry I wrecked the red MGB. He goes back, they resuscitate him, and he tells people his story and says, this nurse who was supposed to be here, but she's on vacation or whatever, I don't think she's alive. And of course, people get upset and they go out and start making phone calls, and they find out that she had died 24 or 48 hours ago in the red MG that her mom and dad had just given her.
So
it was her
explain
21st
that.
birthday.
Right. I don't have to explain
I don't
it.
have,
You explain
no,
it.
I don't have to explain it, right?
But don't you? Well, you kind of do.
Absence of evidence is not,
It's not absence of evidence. It's a piece of evidence.
Well, if you want me to give you an explanation for how that might occur, I would start with the easier one, which is the shoestrings. Am I to believe that this guy had only ever seen these shoestrings once? I mean, one of his patients said he was in and out of the hospital, so he could have seen these shoestrings before. He could have seen the shoestrings before he, went under. Likewise, with the car accident, I mean, who knows? Again, she had died a couple of days before this happened, so who's to say he didn't already have some kind of contact with her? But also, we get suspicions and weird feelings and little spider feelings all the time.
Yeah,
and most of the time we're wrong. But even if we're right once out of every 100,000, that's the one that's going to stick out in our minds, right? Like,
I suppose that's true.
you know, like
As a
I changed my answers when
that's true.
I changed my answers when I was in school a lot. You know, I'd erase and put another answer on the multiple choice. And then I would get my test back, and inevitably, some of those that I changed, I would have changed from right to wrong. And I would allow that to reinforce this notion that I should never change my answer. What I didn't
you
do,
actually should change your answer.
yeah, what I didn't do,
statistically speaking.
what I didn't do was I didn't look at all the ones I erased and actually erase from wrong to right. So likewise, we got to make sure that we're paying attention to, you know, all of the events, not just the hits, but also the misses. You know, there's a lot of times I'm singing a song and I turn on my radio in my car, and that song I'm singing in my head's not playing. But every now and then, that song is playing almost at the exact spot.
That's cheapening belief.
No.
That is cheapening belief.
I think out-of-body experience as evidence of an afterlife,
I don't
more
think we should use
specifically
that.
evidence of God, does cheapen it. Yeah,
Yes,
for me.
I don't think we should use
If
that
I were
either.
going to believe in God, I would believe probably in the type of God that doesn't care so much about all of these little things that we attribute to him, like Friday night lights in football games, right? You catch the winning touchdown and you start doing the little guns up in the air, like thanks God, and I'm thinking to myself, is God really watching, let alone involving himself in this game? Or when a student says, "Oh my God, I passed the test, thank God," I'm like, thank God? Didn't you do the work? That seems to cheapen it. Did you ask God to help you? That's cheating.
I don't think that.
I think prayer's cheating, yes.
I don't think that winning a football game
Right.
or
Passing a test.
a presidential election
Oh,
or whatever. I don't think God is that intimately involved
no.
in human affairs. What I will say is that I believe that human beings are capable of channeling some sort of divinity. And that when somebody hits a home run or somebody scores a touchdown with 22 seconds to go in the Super Bowl,
Yeah.
that they are maybe rising above themselves in a way and maybe connecting with something that is divine. And I'm not saying otherworldly. I told you, I don't believe in the conception of God that a lot of people do, of a sky boss who is bestowing benevolence and punishing. I don't believe that.
Yeah, reinforcing
What
and celebrating individuality.
What I do believe firmly, and history would back me up on this, is that human beings are capable of having what I term a mystic experience, mystic consciousness. And I think that given the overwhelming evidence that shows these type of events happening again and again and again and again throughout different cultures, that we can sort of tap into that.
Yeah.
That there's a way to connect with that.
Well, you know, in addition to near-death experiences, there's another scientist who's done some pretty fascinating experiments in Canada at a university called Laurentine University.
Yeah.
About 25 years ago, I learned of this gentleman's research. His name is Michael Persinger.
Mm-hmm.
And he became famous for exploring people's feelings of being connected with God. He invented this God helmet. And what he would do, so he's got this, what looks like, you know, a 1970s motorcycle helmet. He's got these little electrodes in the helmet plugged into a computer, and basically he sticks it on your head after he surveyed you to find out what kind of believer, the extent of your belief. And he turns these electrodes on at different times to
different frequencies.
Yeah, to stimulate different parts of your head, your brain.
Wow.
And what he's found is that stimulation in one very specific lobe of the brain. We have 4, by the way: the frontal, which is right above your eyes,
Yeah,
in the
the
front of
temporal.
your head; the temporal, which are right behind your ears or in the temple area.
Prefrontal.
That's kind of a sub part of the frontal. Then
Damn
you got
it.
the very
I thought I
back.
had some knowledge.
Very back is the occipital for vision, and then
Yep.
you got the one where
Occipital lobe.
you'd wear your hat if you had it pulled way back on your head, or your yarmulke if you're Jewish, called the parietal lobe. And it turns out that when he stimulates areas of the temporal lobe right behind the ears, people report the most religious types of experiences.
Really?
So he can sort of dial up your religious perceptions and
Or dial it
dial them
back.
back. And by the way, he
Wow.
can do that for both,
Wow.
believers and non-believers. People that are like a 0 on the believer scale, that'd be the most atheistic. People all the way to a 10 on the believer scale, they might be the most certain of a God. Now, what he wasn't surprised by was when he asked people to explain or to sort of describe what it was like that they were feeling. The people who were further on the religion scale described it as spiritual, godlike. I was one with God, my creator. Talked about it in terms of deities. People, however, that were on the 0 end described it as it was a good feeling, it was pleasant, it felt peaceful, I was one with nature. They didn't use the God terms. Now, I guess you could argue that, well, maybe religious people have a language, a lexicon that they can use.
Sure.
Right?
That
And
makes
whereas
sense.
atheists,
That
maybe
makes
they don't
sense.
have a lexicon, right? So
They don't have a language vehicle
Right,
to sort of
to
explain
sort of support or explain,
what.
yeah.
Yeah, that makes
so
sense.
maybe
That makes
if I
sense.
got in there and it felt
Yeah,
really, really
interesting.
good, the first thing that comes to my mind isn't God, because I don't attribute a lot of things to God, because I don't use that language every Sunday, perhaps. But yeah,
So-
it's very interesting nevertheless. I
I-
haven't heard of him lately. I'm not sure if he's still alive, but again, Michael Persinger.
That's interesting.
Yeah, the God helmet. Take a look at him. Laurentine University.
I think I don't know how deeply we have to get into it, because I do believe that the psychological benefit of believing in an afterlife is relatively apparent, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess to sort of amplify that, or to offer an example of that, I would ask you just point blank, would you, all things being equal, would you prefer an afterlife, or would you prefer your belief?
Great question.
It is a good question, because you know what I do? I ask good
You ask good
questions. That's why you have me as a
hard-hitting
co-host.
questions. So the quick answer is yes, of course, I would love to believe there's an afterlife. But for me, honestly, I'm not being flippant or silly here, but honestly, I want it to be like, the opening to Willy Wonka when they walk into the chocolate factory and they go into
In the
area.
crazy room area?
No, when they
that thing
when
is
they go
scary as
into
hell.
the place with all the chocolate river
Oh,
and the flowers
yeah,
that are made
yes.
of candy and like that. So admittedly, my want, my desire, my fantasy of the afterlife is that there's got to be a place, call it heaven, call it whatever you want, that is very amenable to childlike whimsy and childlike desires. I really definitely want it to be childlike. I want to have access to remote control cars.
You want the Christian ideal.
I want to go back
Or
to
the
a
Egyptian
time
ideal.
in my life
Where you were most
where
happy.
I was most happy, didn't have to worry, didn't have to stress. Like it felt like time was moving so slowly, I would never get to tomorrow. Do you remember that, right?
Oh, yeah.
You're in the
sure.
3rd grade and,
Sure.
the semesters or the years come to an end and you're going to be in the 4th. And it's only a week away, but it feels like it's a year away. And then summer hits and it's like, oh my God, summer is so long. And then you're in the 5th grade and then it's like, oh my God, I'll never be in middle school.
Yeah.
My kids remind me of that every day when I say to my daughter, you know what today is? She's like, oh, is it Friday? I'm like, no, it's Thursday. And she goes, oh my God, Friday's never going to get here. I'm like, oh, I thought
Right
like
there,
we're
baby.
right there at the
We're
cusp.
right
man.
there.
Some people call this Friday light. I mean, really?
I do.
She's like,
I do.
no, it's going to take forever. Or, Daddy, how many days is it to my birthday? My son asks every day. His birthday, by the way, is November 28th.
Oh, he's getting close.
No.
What's today? The day's the 10th? So
10th.
18 days, baby.
And you know what he says when you say 18 days?
It's never getting
Never
here.
going to get here, right? You remember these days.
Oh, yeah.
And now what's it like the second half or at least the second third of your life? That's
goes so
that's
quick.
fascinating me. So
I know.
I don't think
it's
I
funny
need
'cause-
an afterlife, by the way, that is forever. I think as long as you change my perception of time, you could give me an afterlife that's like 10 years and it would feel like 100 years, particularly if I was
Sure.
if I was getting to play like I was as a kid.
Yeah.
Now, the more rational, mature part of me says, nah, I don't want or need an afterlife because I don't believe it's going to be like that if there is one. And number two, like a movie, again, I think, for me at least, it makes life way more fun to live if I don't know what the ending is or when exactly it's going to come. That's exciting for me.
I totally.
I want to be in this. I want to be immersed in this experience to the best of my ability.
It's funny because I feel like we share a lot of the same
Mm-hmm.
ideals and concepts of, the way I feel about the afterlife, which is, and I will freely admit, and I think we have to admit, because I would prefer not to go to sleep and never wake up and get eaten by worms in a box, because I would naturally, and I think everybody would.
Oh, yeah.
I'm susceptible to irrational belief. We all are.
Yeah, we all are.
Having said that,
Yeah.
I think that the idea of heaven, as you described it, although if there was a heaven and there wasn't a chocolate, I'm not even like a chocolate guy, but after watching Willy Wonka, the original, not the remakes, but I would be really.
Gotta be.
Wouldn't you be pissed if we got like screwed out of a chocolate river in heaven? Like we need chocolate river.
Oh, dude, it better not look the way Donald
river.
Trump's White House looked. It better not be
No.
opulent and
Oh,
have gold
gross,
toilets and all that.
Gross. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about chocolate river, gummy bear trees.
Yeah.
And the big ones too.
And the adult section, if you ever want to grow up, will have like a really huge library, and it'll have like
Airplane
all the
mini
whiskey.
bottles.
I was going to say
That's right.
whiskey from every part of the world and every era.
That's right.
Oh, my
But here's the
goodness.
thing: all of those things are things, and what they do is convey a feeling.
Yeah, of course.
And so, for me personally, I don't believe in the eternal heaven or the eternal hell. I certainly don't believe in the eternal hell. And yet I feel like in some respects I've been to both.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the feeling that we get when we hate or when we're miserable or when we, and how many times have we talked about, the stresses of parenting or work or whatever, or you don't, those, when they become all encompassing, when they dominate your very existence, that's hell.
Yeah.
That's hell. And I have had experiences where I've hated, another person or something. And that is such a draining feeling to hate. And then the opposite of that is love, right? And I feel like when I am near the chocolate river and I'm just surrounded by love. And I'm sure you have that when you're
100%.
when you're sitting there at the soccer field watching your kids play a little soccer and your wife is next to you.
Well, my wife's typically not next to me because I'm screaming and she's embarrassed or upset with me.
No, 100%.
But she's nearby. She's nearby.
Nearby. Theoretically, she's there.
Yeah.
But to me, those emotions, we make our own heaven. We make our own hell.
We certainly can.
I don't see why those go away just because our functions stop.
Well, that's a lovely thought, man, and I think that's a lovely place to end it on. Unless you've got anything else you want to share.
No,
we've been at this about an hour today. Again,
I love the afterlife,
would like
man. I love the topic.
Like to one more time shout out happy birthday to your sister Jana.
Happy birthday, Jana.
You better be listening. If you're not, then someone needs to send this to her and let her know that we've shouted her out.
My favorite atheist. By the way, my favorite atheist, Jana, believes in ghosts.
How about that?
Boom. She does. She believes in ghosts.
Man, well, that's all I've got. I'm sure people are tired of hearing us ramble on.
No, God, no. That's what they live for.
Nelson, I appreciate you, man, and hope you have a good night and a good rest of your weekend.
You too, brother.
Thanks.
All right, so Susan, you were denied entry from the Saints Lounge yet again because it's not part of your package, okay? There are plenty of other amenities to enjoy in heaven. I'm sure you did see a drag queen go in there. I know whom you're speaking of. She ran a nonprofit for 20 years. And Susan, with all due respect, what did you do for 20 years? Other than give your sister bad perms and call the cops on your neighbors. Yeah. Thank you.